It's not a very long report. There is some detail involved, and it's important that we all understand what we're voting on for Article 4. I've also added a couple of slides on funding for the articles, and I think that's it. So it's not a very long report. It's just important to see. How's that? Everybody see it? Good to go. Well, this is the slide that I normally put up. This is what we try to do on the Finance Committee. Reduce long-term debt without increasing operational budget by adding available funds to stabilization. You do recall that we keep adding money every year to stabilization to pay for that $60 million school that we've approved a year and a half ago. So we continue to do that, and as we do that and draw down the funds of stabilization, we will maintain stabilization account in a very good condition. Second, plan for the future capital items by adding available funds to the capital stabilization. 2 years ago or 3 years ago, we established a short-term capitalization account to plan for capital items that will be coming on off of a 5-year plan. I mean, next year we have $1 million fire truck. We're doing a lot of different things, and by doing this, by putting the money there, we won't have to take it out of free cash or raise and appropriate the money. It will be in that account, and we'll be able to pay cash and minimize debt. Last one is increase and maintain a commitment to reduce the tax rate. Last year, we reduced the tax rate by $1.8 million, and in FY16, we project to do the same $1.8 million. That's a lot of money, bless you. That's a lot of money to give back to the tax rate. And as we go forward, we're going to try and maintain some level between 1 million and 1.5 million. Right now, we can do 1.8 million, and that's what we're going to do, and it's a good move. Last, maintain operational budget control. That's the hardest part. On a $90 million budget, 85% of the budget is salaries and wages. So we have contracts that we have to deal with, and in years that are difficult on the revenue side, what we've tried to do is minimize the maintenance and minimize the increases to the departments. And so if we've asked for 2%, which we did this year, it's up to the departments, if they go over that 2%, to try and absorb it in their own budget. And that's hard. All right, so these are the objectives for FY16's budget. As I said, taxpayer relief, 1.8 million. We also put aside 1 million for capital projects like you see on this year's warrant. Some of them will be taken out of the long-term or the short-term capitalization stabilization account. Others will be taken from free cash or that budget item of $1 million. Maintain debt service at 3.5 million. That's important as we start to pay the school debt. We don't want to increase the operational budget, because if we do increase that number, obviously departments are going to suffer because the money's got to come from somewhere. So that's why we're going to take it out of stabilization, and we should be good to go and maintain that 3.5 million. Doesn't give us a lot of room on the debt schedule. Operational expenses, recommend a modest increase to the departments of 2%. Operational expenses and maintenance, try to maintain 0, and there'll be exceptions, which I'll explain. And again, increase the stabilization account by 500,000 FY16. We're not going to be able to do that next year, and I'll explain why. All right, this is hard to see, and I apologize. We need a better video system. This is what we put together as a balance sheet, okay? On the left-hand side are the revenues. Can anybody see this, or is it too out of focus? Okay. I don't have my glasses on, so I'm focusing without my glasses. Huh? No, this needs to go back, actually. Closer? All right. Left hand, I'll get it on. I'll just move it over. Left hand side is the revenue side. 2015, I mean, we've done this every year. 2015 revenue last year was 60,593,474. We're allowed to increase that number by 2.5%, which is Prop 2.5. And new growth we estimate at 400,000. Total 62,508,311. Local, that's what we can raise and appropriate. Local receipts are 6 million. That's tax, property tax, and other taxes, whole stuff. I don't know. Not important. Cherry sheet numbers: 24,340,000 is state aid. This was, or this is the House Ways and Means 2016 number. Now they have to go through and approve that, and then it's got to go back to the, then it's got to go to the Senate. Then they have to get a committee together and approve the number, and then it's got to go to the governor for approval. So we're basing it on the House Ways and Means number, which is usually pretty close. The occupancy, the room occupancy tax is the hotel tax. That's what we receive on pretty much an annual basis. Offsets for the library, which are reductions, and school choice. This is school choice out. Sorry, in. This number comes from students coming into our system that other towns pay for. That number goes directly to the school budget. Then the sewer department is totally separate. It's an enterprise fund. So at the end of the day, total receipts, 97,512,457. It's the easy side. This is the hard side. Expenditures. Again, we projected or recommended a 2% budget increase across the board for salaries and wages and 0 on expenses. So the left-hand column is what we projected the number to be. The right-hand column is what was actually submitted and approved. As you can see, we projected 91,538,753, and the number actually came in at 90,892,908, which is good. It's less than we projected. Then we add the bottom, which is stabilization, overlay account, assessments, that's choice out. Those are the number of students that leave the system and go to other towns. We're paying over $1 million for students to go to other towns, and we're only getting 400,000 students in. Capital projects, $1 million, and the levy, I'm sorry, I'm just having a senior moment. The taxpayer relief is what the levy adjustment is, 1.8 million. As you can see, the expenditures are 96,592,321. Now, if you go to the center, the surplus was 274,291, which is different. The surplus submitted was 920,000. Snow and ice, which was, I think we had a bad snow and ice year, was $820,000. So the blue circle is you, but that's the lowest it's been since I've been on the finance committee. So it's a very difficult year. And I'll explain some of the numbers down at the bottom. So we have to watch that number because it's pretty close. Because if the budget goes or the state aid goes one way, that number can go away. Okay, back to normal. Okay, some of the department highlights. As you know, last year we instituted an IT department, and this year we're funding it at $468,000. That's about $230,000 for equipment and maintenance. It's a lot of money. School district, they went up 3.95% to $42,600,000, and I'll go into a little bit of detail about that as well. Blackstone Valley came in at $50,000 less than last year. Everybody applaud Mike, okay. The cemetery number, even though it's not a very big budget, went up 11%. And the reason it went up 11% is last year we had an issue with the Purchase Street Cemetery and the Vernon Grove Cemetery. The Purchase Street Cemetery needed some work. And there was nobody really in charge of that cemetery. So the Finance Committee and the Vernon Grove people, we all sat down and agreed that they would take over the maintenance of the Purchase Street Cemetery. We and the Finance Committee felt that was very important because the Mill 40 is buried there and it needs to be kept up and maintained. So the budget went up 11%, which was about $8,000 or $9,000. It wasn't a lot of money, but it was important to point out that that cemetery will be taken care of. All right, the big numbers. Workman's comp went down because we had less people on workman's comp, but retirement contribution went up 5.9%, $4 million annual budget. Health insurance went up 7.2%. Our health insurance costs are $12,300,000 on an annual basis on a $90 million budget. That's significant. Short-term interest went up 25%, $150,000. The reason it went up is because we're starting to bond the new school, and we have to take out short-term bonds before we go into the long-term bond. So we increased that number. There was an increase in electricity costs, or does everybody know, right? To the town, our budget in FY16 will be $1,300,000. It's up about $450,000 over last year, or over this year. And the snow and ice was up 72% to $860,000. Scotty, we can't have any more snow. All right. This, and this is hard to see as well, is the cash flow for the new Woodland School. The red line is where we are on the curve. We have paid to date $7 million in money to keep that project going forward. Now, we get reimbursed from the state, so it's a cash flow issue that Zach works out, but this is how it's going to go over the next year and a half. And at the end, we'll pay $60,893,000 plus, including the reimbursement from the state. So we have to watch, or Zach has to watch cash flow going forward for the new school. It's very important. And they have to be on budget. Also very important. Okay, nobody's going to see this. Just some highlights. I went over the 2% overall, the retirement, health insurance, electricity, 100,000 snow and ice. Let me explain that. In our budget, we have 500,000 set aside for snow and ice every year. Snow and ice numbers have been running 200,000 to 300,000 over that on an annual basis. So this year, the Finance Committee agreed to increase that 500 to 600,000. Now you say, okay, great, but the problem is, if you increase that number, you can never decrease it. It's a state law. So once we sit at 600, we're there, ad infinitum. So increase the operational budget by $100,000. Okay, not a bad deal. Let me talk about the school district and what the numbers meant, the 3.95% increase. This is what the school department presented to us for increases for this year above the 2% and going forward. This is ELL and special education. Increases over what we had in this year's budget. And please understand, the Finance Committee understands that special education and ELL are underfunded mandates by the federal government and the state. So we have no choice but to take care of those kids. And it's expensive, and I'll show you that number later. So right now they're asking for, on the special ed side, 1 teacher, 1 assistant, and some hardware. And on the ELL side, 3 teachers and some interpreters and administrators and some material. for $569,530 increase in their budget. That's part of that 3.9% increase. If I'm going too fast, stop me. About 3.5 weeks ago, there was a meeting at the high school with Lieutenant Governor Polito, Representative Fernandez, and State Senator Fatman, and a number of administrators and teachers and local officials to discuss the special education and the ELL problem. And Milford is unique, somewhat unique in the state. There are about 6 or 7 towns that are in the same situation, where we have a high number of ELL students and they're only funded at 48 cents on a dollar by the state. So there was a great presentation by Jennifer Lancaster, the director of ELL, and these are some of the slides from her presentation. This is important. Back in 2005, there were 170 ELL students in the system. 10 years later, there are 450 students in the system at all grade levels. We have no choice but to take care of this. So it's going to cost money. That $539,000 is part of that cost, or part of this reason. This chart shows the number of students versus the number of teachers or direct service personnel to the ELL students. You can see that the number of students is back up at 450, as we said, and the number of service personnel, teachers and aides, et cetera, has gone pretty flat. And there's only about 14 of them in the whole system. And they need special certification to do all this. Just some numbers from Jennifer's report. Projected 2015-2016 numbers. A total of 507 ELL students out of 4,150 students in Milford. Significant percentage. We have to fund it. So the finance committee in the town is prepared to do it, and this body needs to understand what the cost is. Again, 48 cents on a dollar at this point in time. Special education is funded with circuit breaker at about 72 cents on a dollar. Both of those items are being looked at the state legislature for modifications and changes. There have been bills submitted by Representative Fernandez and Senator Fatman, and I know, I was told, I'm sorry, that there's a group getting together and making a presentation on the Chapter 70 formula to take into consideration demographics. So it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to eventually happen. How'd I do that? Just some numbers. Special education. The in-district teachers and materials are $5,381,000 and change for 737 students out of 4,100, 4,300 students. $7,000 per student. Out of district, when we can't satisfy the needs of those special needs kids, is in the this is in the 2016 budget. $2,000,001 and 53 pupils at a cost of about $40,000 a pupil. Now, again, we have no choice. These are federally mandated requirements. So if somebody has a problem with and an IEP is set, we have to do it. The district has added programs over the course of the last 4 or 5 or 6 years to bring more students in as opposed to sending them out of district, which has saved the town significant amount of money, even though that's a big number. So total special education, $7,545,000 out of a $42 million budget. ELL, $1,405,000, 472 pupils at $2,900 a student. So the total special ed ELL budget is almost $9 million out of a $42 million budget. It's about 21% of their budget. Significant number. So that's where their 3.95% increase comes from, for the most part. Hello? All right, so our recommendations for town meeting tonight is recommending a budget increase of 4.1%, limit debt service to $3.5 million using the stabilization account when necessary, and it will be used next year. Maintain the infrastructure and continue a moratorium on new debt. We're still very close to that debt limit that we want to be at, and over the course of the next 7 or 8 years, a lot of the debt will start falling off. Insignificant compared to the $60 million. Okay, moving on to the town meeting articles tonight. It's important to know where the funding is going to come from. We have choices. We can raise and appropriate the money, we can use free cash, we can use stabilization, or we can bond the money, the project. The biggest one on this list is the Godfrey Brook number. It's 36, Article 36. So I thought I'd highlight that and explain how we're going to pay for that. Our proposed way to pay for it. We're going to take $500,000 that was going to be slated for stabilization and put it towards Godfrey Brook. We're going to use $1 million in free cash, which leaves a total of $1.1 million out of the cost. And if you see below that, we expect to see $800,000 from FEMA, which will leave us $300,000 to either bond or pay out of free cash in the fall, which is really good manipulation of the money in order to do this project. A bunch of us worked on that, the town accountant and the treasurer and finance committee, so and our financial advisor, Paul Abindanza. And that's it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.